Welcome back to Tice Talk. We are into the second hour. It's still a bit grey and gloomy outside, and I think many residents in the great city of Manchester are also a bit grey and gloomy. But listen to this. Does this sound familiar? Where you have a referendum, there's a decisive result by the people in the referendum, and then over the subsequent years, guess what? Politicians and the establishment, well, they pretend they're going to listen to the referendum and then they start to undermine it. And then actually they try and do exactly the opposite. Yes, that's what happened with Brexit. And yes, once again, that's what's happening in Manchester. Because a number of years ago, there was a referendum about whether or not to have a car charging scheme in and around Greater Manchester. And over 70% of people, quite understandably, overwhelmingly, said thanks, but no thanks. And here we are, 2022, and the Greater Manchester Authority, under the leadership of Mayor Andy Burnham, re-elected last year, is now trying to impose a vehicle charging scheme, which they've sort of called a clean air zone charging scheme, that was due to come in May, which involves not just a few million quid, not just tens of millions of pounds, but potentially hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' cash. Just unbelievable what is going on. And now, because there's been a little bit of sort of a pushback from the great citizens of the Greater Manchester area, Andy Burnham all of a sudden is trying to push back, and he's delaying it until July, I think. So joining me to discuss this further, what I think is a scandalous waste of taxpayers' cash, is Nick Buckley, MBE, founder of the Mancunian Way charity. Nick, a very good morning to you. So just help my listeners and viewers a little bit. I've just sort of set the scene there, but we've got this clean air zone charging scheme, which is supposed to be imposed, but now is going to be delayed. What's going on, and who does this apply to, and what sort of cost are we really talking about here?
So they've changed the name from a congestion charge to a clean air zone because who in their right mind is against clean air? So there's some PR spinning on that front. I first heard about this January last year, and I'm quite politically aware. And I only found out about it January last year, and the public consultation had already finished. It had been 7 weeks, under 5,000 people responded, and that's all the democratic will they need now to overturn the referendum. So as opposed to a normal congestion charge, where that's all vehicles, this is for commercial vehicles only. And the area it covers is the whole of Greater Manchester. Half of Manchester is lovely fields and countryside, but it affects them as well. So at the moment, we're looking at something like £7.50 a day for taxis. Small vans are a tenner. Then, depending on the size of your van, it goes up. And HGVs are something like £120 a day. And some people have said to me, well, I don't have a business, so I'm fine. Well, all your deliveries to your supermarket will incur this charge. All your Amazon deliveries, everything you pay will have to go up because people have to pay for this charge.
And is this for all vehicles, or just vehicles of a certain age with emission levels above a certain level?
It's nothing to do with age of the vehicle. There's a huge list of which vehicles this applies to. And it's basically 99% of vehicles, of commercial vehicles apply.
But okay, so it's commercial vehicles. But of course, that actually is then essentially targeting the private sector, the self-employed, the small businesses, private businesses, the hard-working. And of course, I guess it doesn't affect public sector workers or public sector quangos and institutions.
It doesn't, but it'll affect the council taxpayer of those areas because they're going to have to pay extra money to change those vehicles that belong to the council.
Okay, and of course, all of this is based on, you talked about the clean air, and that essentially it was believed that the Greater Manchester area didn't meet the EU levels for clean air, for the emission levels and the like. But also, I gather from reading up on it that much of this was based on not real data, but modelling. And we've all learnt a lot about government modelling and the quality of it and the reliability of it in recent months and years, haven't we?
Yes, so I'm not an expert in this, but my understanding of this is it was based on 2018 data, and then they used computer modelling to predict the level of pollution going forward. And you're right to say we've now learned that computer modelling can be a complete waste of time, just that has been with the COVID, millions and millions of deaths that were predicted. So modelling itself isn't concrete, and we're basing this on 4-year-old data and computers.
And of course, with COVID, actually traffic levels in cities has dramatically reduced. So it may well be that the real data, also in terms of emissions, in terms of air quality, that actually the emissions has reduced and the air quality has improved. And Andy Burnham has sort of said, as soon as the levels meet the required criteria, then the scheme would be stopped. So how much money are we talking about here, Nick? And therefore, would that money all potentially be wasted if we suddenly met the target 6-12 months down the track?
Yeah, so Andy Burnham is saying the scheme will stop and be scrapped the day we hit the targets. Now, we have to look at how much this scheme costs. And it's quite complicated, and the government never like to tell you exactly how much things cost. They're open. And some information is out there. So again, the information I found, let me read this. So information I found on a government report, this isn't on Facebook, this is a government report, states for Greater Manchester, the project funding, that's to install the cameras and the signs, we're looking at £250 million.
250 million quid of taxpayers' money to stick up some cameras and a few signs?
Yeah, up to 800 cameras. And then on top of this isn't the final figure, and on top of this, we're looking at an extra 220 million to implement the scheme, to give some people subsidies, to do this, to do that. And that's almost another £250 million. That's nearly a B, not an M, a B, £250 million.
That's utterly mind-boggling. I think we're all in the wrong business. We should be in the installation of CCTV camera business in Greater Manchester. So presumably some contracts have already been placed. But if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is that potentially hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds of money could be spent, and yet if 6 or 12 months later Greater Manchester meets the targets, then the scheme would stop.
That's what we're being told. Now, this money, let's be honest, this scheme was supposed to start in 3 months' time. Those contracts would have been signed a year or two ago. A lot of this money has been spent or has been contracted to be spent. No matter what happens now, the waste of money is tremendous.
I just find it utterly mind-boggling that these sums could be spent or potentially spent. So Andy Burnham's obviously in a bit of a pickle on this. He's delayed the scheme theoretically until July and is now trying to sort of shift the blame, I gather, back to the government. What's the real position?
This is pure politics. I stood against Andy Burnham last May for the Mayor of Greater Manchester, and Andy Burnham was re-elected on a bigger majority. He did excellent at that election. He got more people voting for him. It was a validation for Andy Burnham. But every hustings I went to and I confronted him about this, 100% behind it. He was telling us there's no option, this is a great scheme. Same with the Lib Dems, same with the Greens. And they all wanted this scheme. It's his scheme. The government said to Greater Manchester, your pollution is a bit high. Tell us what you're going to do to reduce it. And they came up with this scheme. This scheme wasn't imposed on Greater Manchester. It's his scheme. And all of a sudden, nobody cared about it last year. Nobody understood it. But once the signs started going up in January saying this scheme is coming, people started asking questions. And all of a sudden, this tsunami of inquiries hit Andy Burnham, and everyone was saying, no, 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 no. And he's realised, this is my career going down the pan, this.
Well, that's right. Obviously, there's millions of voters in and around Manchester and Greater Manchester. And so he's delayed it until July. Is it possible that actually it may never get introduced, despite the fact that obviously large contracts have already been placed?
That's what I'm fighting for. And there's a group out there called Rethinkgm, the Clean Air Zone. Join that group if you want to get involved in this. It's a non-party political group, and we're trying to get it scrapped. But even when we get it scrapped, someone needs to be held accountable for the millions that have been wasted on this. Now, what I found out 2 days ago, this will surprise some of your viewers. If you live in Wigan or Rochdale, the government never said your air was polluted. Your councils volunteered to join this scheme. At least the other 8 councils can say, well, you know, we have to do something about pollution. Wigan and Rochdale, you joined because your council wanted you to spend more money.
I can't believe it. Nick Buckley, thank you so much for those thoughts. That was Nick Buckley live from Manchester regarding the clean air scheme that Andy Burnham's got himself in a right pickle on, where they are potentially wasting hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' cash.